Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me on the latest installment of What in World Weekly. I've been away for a few days, been very busy with a bunch of other life stuff, so I haven't had time to make a new video, provide some further updates. But a very big thing, case, story, whatever you want to call it, is going on in the UK right now. So I think this is exactly what this enterprise was created to talk about and inform, educate, offer opinions on. So here we are, and I'm going to be talking about, of course, the verdict of Martyn Blake on Chris Kaba. Essentially, well, let me get into the video first to summarize. I do make this in cuts. So a few days ago, a police officer by the name of Martyn Blake was acquitted of the murder of Chris Kaba. Now, for those of you overseas that don't know about this case, or maybe you've heard about it from social media, X, Instagram, TikTok, the world is one massive global space now. Essentially, Chris Kaba was a 24-year-old man who was, I want to say, wanted in connection with crimes. He had committed crimes in the past, but I don't think he'd been identified as a prime suspect in those crimes. So at the time, I guess he wasn't wanted for any crimes. And he was driving his car, which the police had information that the car was apparently used in a crime a few days before, and so they, marked a suspicion that they were following the car, and then they tried to corner him, and he attempted to flee. Um, I guess attempted to flee is a strong word because in the video, which I have behind me, you can see that he's just driving his car into other cars because there was really no space to run away. And ultimately, Martyn Blake, the officer in question, fired one shot into the car. A bit too accurate, that shot. Went right into his head, and so he died. And there was a lot of obviously when the case was dropped last year, when we started to get details about it, the fact that he was unarmed didn't look too good, and ultimately the police officer was charged with murder and now acquitted. I'm going to try and take this in two parts. First, you have the case itself, the verdict, all that kind of stuff, and then obviously the social media reaction, which can't be ignored. If we start with the verdict itself, I think generally people were very angry. Again, I'm touching on the social media stuff right now. I said I'll leave that for later, but when you have a case like this and the police officer is charged with murder, um, I wonder if it's an intentional tactic by the CPS, because it's going to be very rare for any jury to convict someone in this case of murder. I actually looked up the legal statute to do with murder, and the CPS guidelines on charging people with murder. And murder is a very, I guess, onerous thing to prove. And there's many elements that make up murder that you can see how, if one of them is not in the jury's mind satisfied, they can reach a case of not guilty. I don't know how it works. Maybe some legal mind I can speak to about downgrading the charge and saying, we don't find him guilty of murder, but we find him guilty of a lesser charge. I guess that's why prosecutors stack charges. So if you don't find him guilty of one, they might get you on the other one. But I don't think this was done in this case. It was just a simple murder case. Also, I would love to see the PDF for the charge to see exactly what the statute was based on. I don't know if we have different, I'm guessing we have different types of murders. So it'd be good to know which specific one he was charged with. And so what were the requirements for him to be found guilty in that case. But there were stats that came out talking about the fact that, it since, I don't know, they've been collecting the data or whatever, basically no police officer has ever been convicted, actually sent to prison for, killing someone. And again, I would say this is not surprising when you think of the kind of charge we're talking about here. In almost all these cases, it's going to involve another violent criminal, even if they're not being violent in that present moment in time. And also the onerous burden of trying to prove intent and malice and all these things as something that is going to be very unlikely to be satisfied in the eyes of a jury, because these are trained officers who respond to violent incidents, and they would say in those moments they're making very split-second decisions. So to try and, I guess, infer intent to kill from their actions, especially a malicious intent to kill, it's going to be very difficult to do. So in that case, I'll probably say when you see stuff like this, you probably shouldn't be surprised. If they charge them with something lesser, you can see how you're more likely to find them guilty of that one. But I would love to know, maybe anyone out there can tell me their opinions on whether or not they think this is an intentional tactic by the CPS, because they know these cases are almost always going to fail in court. It's very unlikely that the jury is going to find the policeman guilty of murder in a case like this. And I guess if you looked at the history of it, probably from when the charges were first dropped, you already knew from then that it's very unlikely that it's going to be a case of murder in this case. In terms of the actual facts of this case, I have seen the video a few times, um, and there's a narrative that he had his hands on the steering wheel, and I guess to say that he wasn't reaching for a gun or any type of weapon like that, um, and so therefore he's unarmed and he shouldn't have been killed. Um, I guess my take is not too different. I actually spoke to one of my friends before coming on to record this, and she was very passionate about it in a different direction, which is like he wasn't complying with the officers, and she also made the point about the car being a weapon. That was something I hadn't really thought about. I'll be honest. And when you watch the video, the car was in a very confined space, so it's not the typical kind of ramming your car into people type of thing. But the car was being rammed into other cars. I guess there was police in front of the car trying to and behind it, trying to like command him to stop and get out or whatever. It was clearly boxed in by cars on both sides, so you actually physically couldn't. But I did think though that if you imagine a case where we had a lot of terrorism attacks a few years ago where people were ramming their cars into people, if someone was trying to do that, the police would shoot them, and there would be no question that this was a appropriate and legal thing to do because cars are a threat to life because we've seen that happen in terrorist attacks. Now that doesn't quite seem to be exactly the case here, but you can see how again a jury can reach the conclusion that well in a similar case of someone using their car as a weapon to ram into someone, it's hard to say they were unarmed because being unarmed in the traditional sense of having a gun or a knife, we've seen from terrorist attacks that cars can do tremendous damage. So again, these are the type of hurdles that make it very basically impossible for a jury to reach a conclusion in this case that the officer is guilty. But I guess also going going beyond that, I think the police officer in this case probably was a bit too, I won't say trigger happy. That sounds like he's trying to go out there to kill someone. Um, I would say more like he probably reacted a bit too quickly. So his hand was on the trigger, and he was looking at the situation. I guess even in his defense, you can hear when you're saying stuff like, it was a split second decision. I thought about it too fast. Yes, but that also shows maybe to me a kind of lack of self control. Like you're meant to be trained for this, and it's very difficult to simulate this type of experience. But in that situation, when you look at the geometry of the whole situation, everything was kind of under control. Like he was clearly blocked in on both sides. He wasn't going anywhere. Okay, yes, you might not know he has a gun or didn't have a gun at that time, and the fact that the car was linked to um, a a weapons incident a few days ago, that could make you suspect that yes, maybe he has a gun. Is he gonna reach for it and start firing at all the officers to go out in a blaze of glory? I'm not too sure. Again, in that moment in time, could you reach that conclusion reasonably? I guess you potentially, theoretically could. Obviously, the stats don't support that people usually do this kind of stuff. They'll ultimately just give up. So it does seem like the situation was generally in control. And so if you had waited, 15, 20 more seconds and then decided to fire a shot, that could have saved, a lot of, saved his life in this case, because maybe in that time you realize that, okay, the car was clearly boxed in. He wasn't going anywhere. Eventually, he would just have to give up. So that was something that I would probably say very difficult circumstances, but on the balance of that kind of analysis, he probably reacted a bit too quickly in shooting him. But if you're trying to go from someone reacted a bit too quickly to um, a violent person who may or may not have had a gun in the car you didn't know, going from that to okay, you murdered someone, which again, even in the jury's mind, when you think of murder, I'm sure they would think, and they know more people like you and I. When you think of murder, you don't think about the police doing it. You think about, you know, I guess criminals doing it to each other, one person doing it to another person who didn't deserve it. And in this case, given the criminal history of this person, which the jury was not supposed to know, but I'm sure they didn't. It doesn't take them a genius. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that this is not just your average regular citizen. That probably doesn't help in that case. So the verdict was what it was, but it's not really surprising given the fact that they were trying to prove that a policeman with intent and malice murdered someone. Very difficult to actually get a guilty verdict based on those kind of charges. Now, I guess to the more exciting bit, I don't say that with glee, which is the social media reaction and the general reaction of people. Obviously, a lot of people seem to be trying to make the principled point that we don't really want police in the business of killing people, which is totally fair and true. Um, and so, their position is that this was clearly, you know, an unlawful killing, and so this should have been murder in this case. Again, I guess I've already talked about the verdict and and how most reasonable people will see that if they sat on a jury. You have obviously the racial element of him being black, and the fact that I guess the stats show that disproportionately black people in these kind of situations have been met with that deadly force as opposed to, I guess, other non-black people. Um, it doesn't help that you put yourself in these situations, I imagine. But I would also think that if you look at the social media reaction, um, this is just my personal take. I guess as the social media ombudsman, I'll call myself. I think there's a lot of hypocrisy in people now pretending to care about due process. So I saw a tweet I came across, and this girl was basically saying that, well, this person was a violent criminal, domestic abuser who actually shot someone before. This is not someone that I'm going to be losing sleep over the fact that they're dead. And everyone was kind of piling on her, saying like, why can you say this? Do you not get the principle? Blah blah. And they're making good points, but they're hypocrites. The girl was actually probably reflecting more accurately what the social media reaction would have been if we found this out in reverse. So in a world where the police maybe release some information saying we're looking for this person who shot in a nightclub, a week before, who is now wanted because they, abused their pregnant girlfriend, and they may be armed and dangerous. I don't think people in that case would be like, yes, but let's try and get him alive. Not people on social media anyway. The people that are pretending now to care about principles, there's been conversations in the past where they have not shown the same consistency in their care for principles and due process as they have shown in this case. And I think even generally, right? I've done podcasts or updates like this before where I've talked about the fact that our generation, if you want to be more general about it, has moved very much to the right on crime and punishment, on criminal justice. So, for example, we have the culture we have nowadays, which a lot of people say is better, is actually better than what we had before. Fair enough. Or, for example, sexual crimes or crimes of a sexual nature or alleged crimes of a sexual nature. Are people? Am I to believe that these people apply this principle of due process to those kind of crimes? When they were alleged, of course they don't. There's been many conversations where people have just been anonymously accused by other people, and everyone on social media says this is the day their life and career must end. In fact, there's been people after Liam Payne died. I'm not saying this is the same people, by the way. I'm just talking about general social media reactions, who said that because Liam Payne, abused his ex-girlfriend emotionally or physically, they're not going to mourn his death. Now, again, that doesn't mean that they say like they want the police to kill him, but it is a window into what you genuinely think to believe. Like, okay, due process is about making sure everyone has a fair hearing and everyone has their day in court. When people get accused of stuff, even put aside the sexual stuff, just general misconduct, as it pertains to whatever it is, the general social media reaction is to have a mob and try and destroy that person. Now these people, again, not saying everyone, are now postulating that they actually care about due process all along, and what really matters to them is the consistency of making sure that everyone is treated fairly. Honestly, to me, that's been the most shocking part about this. You've even had people who, in the past, have celebrated the fact that there's an infamous Dr. Umar video where he talks about how some of these young criminals have to be put to sleep because there's no saving them. There's been people that clearly like retweet and agree with this kind of rhetoric, um, when other information about criminals come out because of the barbarity of the crimes and things like that. Again, am I to believe that these people now suddenly care about due process when it comes to criminals? I find that very hard to believe. I'll be so honest. So the girl's comments, make of it what you will. Generally, I do agree with the sentiment that we don't want to see people getting killed extrajudicially, and I think if this new commitment to due process is genuine by the online mob, I welcome this. I don't to brag, but I've been on that side for a very long time. So if more people want to jump onto that side. Not saying my side specifically. I welcome that. But what I do actually predict is that in the next few weeks, we're going to see a situation which is different, where someone's going to be accused of something, or we're going to see some information about some crimes. And you're going to have people saying stuff like, oh, people are not ready to hear my uncomfortable opinions about what we should do to people like this. We might need the death penalty back, etc., etc. That's the reality of how people actually react to crime and punishment. And that's what I've seen, being on social media. So the reaction has surprised me a bit. So I think on that note, I'll probably leave this one here. There are other topics to talk about, but I don't want this video to be as long as my previous video. Although ultimately, when I have other updates that are not just to do with specific one topics, I will try and make it, have some variation in it, because it's fun to hear, different perspectives and different things from, different areas of the world. I will have a video very soon about my prediction on the American elections. I know we're about 2 to 3 weeks away from election day. So I'm going to try and go and prognosticate and talk about who I think is going to win. And yeah, so I think that should be a very interesting video. I'll give you some reasons why and things of that nature. So hope you enjoyed this update. And in the first instance, please do try and watch my stuff. Subscribe when you can. Like the videos, help me with the algorithm, and comment, interact, give me your opinions. What did you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let's get some lively conversation going. Let's build a community. So speak to you guys in the next update. Thank you for watching.